Hello and welcome to USA Biz Party. Today, it's just me for now. My name is Esther Ocampo and I am the co-host usually of USA Biz Party. Anna will be joining me in a few moments. She just had something urgent to take care of first in her place of work. So we can all relate. We can all say that it happens. There's always something comes up last minute and unexpectedly. But we wanted to kick on at the usual time of noon Eastern, Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, or the other way. Yeah, I think that's correct. I'm in the United Kingdom, so it's 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So if all my time zones are all mixed up, I apologize. But today we're talking about cultivating an adaptive leadership style. So, what exactly does that mean? That's what we're going to go through here on USA Biz Party today. We will delve into the essential strategies that for evolving and thriving as a leader in today's dynamic business landscape. So everything is always shifting and moving and changing and evolving. Pivoting would be another word. We've seen that a lot in recent years where we've all had to pivot, we've all had to learn, we've all had to adapt. And 2025 is no different. We are always having to move forward and keep up with the times as well. So what does it mean to have an adaptive leadership style? We're going to kick off with assessing our team needs. So whether you have a team of one, just yourself, or whether you have a team of hundreds or anywhere in the middle, you need to assess what the needs are of that team. If it's just yourself that's working in the company, you also have needs. You also have things that you want to do, things that you desire to do, things that you would like to do. So I recommend that you write them all out, that you have it, that you sorry for that. You have a list of your wants, needs, and desires. So having a want is nice. You don't have to have it fulfilled. But having a need is something that should be on the top of your priorities to fill. So whether that need be something relatively simple like having your birthday off every year or blocking out all the mornings so you can do work in the business rather than going and finding more clients, whether that be doing the paperwork, the admin, just spending an extra 30 minutes with family in the morning around breakfast table. All of these things can be part of your needs. So when you're assessing the team needs, if you have a small team of one, it's could be easy enough to assess them, but putting them into practice might be different. But when you have a team of hundreds, how do you assess their needs? How do you figure out what everybody needs or what the majority needs, or whether it's one demographic needs and the other one doesn't, and how to implement those changes? It could be as simple as, like I said, having your birthday off. It could be something else like having flexible working schedules, especially over the summer when maybe their children are off school, or letting them go home earlier on a Friday and maybe working an extra hour on Monday to Thursday. Whatever it is that your workers, your team show you that they need, listen to it, because it is far easier and far cheaper to maintain, to keep the staff and the team that you already have, rather than having to go and look for more. Okay, I'll say that again. It is cheaper and easier to keep the team that you have rather than have them leave because they're not happy, have them look for somewhere that will meet their needs, that turns into a very expensive exercise for your company, both in time and in money. Because think of the time that you spent training that person up. Think of the time that you spent investing in training, investing even in the hiring process, whether that meant hiring someone else in or placing adverts in, local papers, online, LinkedIn, etc., etc. Think of the effort it took you to get the people in place that you have, and consider how much more difficult it will be to replace them now that you're used to them, they're used to you. If it could just be an issue of assessing their needs and meeting those needs, or at least trying to meet those needs. So, how would you evaluate and respond to the unique dynamics of your team? There are many ways that I would suggest that you could do that. One would be a questionnaire, anonymous questionnaire. Definitely try to keep their names off it as much as possible. It allows people to be more open and honest when it comes to their wants and needs and requirements. But if you have someone on your team that is more vocal and verbal about what they need, listen as well. Don't just shut them down because you know the person or you know who it is that's coming from. Be open to having your door open and letting people come in and express their frustrations, their unique dynamics, what it is that they need. Anna is joining me here, so I will just welcome Anna to stage. Welcome, Anna. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I know. It's been a busy 2 or 3 weeks here, but we're surviving quite well. How are you?
That's good. I'm good. I have been rambling on for the last 8 minutes. But I'm at the point of where we're assessing the team's needs and how we would do that when it comes to having an adaptive leadership style. How would you, who has a large team, assess their needs?
Well, a large team is me and about 4 or 5 people, including some contractors who work for us on a regular basis. So, honestly, what helps me a great deal is, let me see something, just feel better. I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, so what helps me is, first of all, I have a team of advisors that I work with. So if I feel stuck in any particular in any particular mode, then I I contact them and I go, here's where I'm stuck. What do I need to do? So one of the things that I do on a regular basis is that I have a weekly big team meeting, and then I have a weekly leadership meeting. So I have 2 people on my team who are my leaders, and they basically run the 2 parts of the operation that they're responsible for. One is for the money, and the other is for the operations or getting stuff done. They have the freedom to vocalize concerns. Now, when I hear about these concerns, one of the things I am working on is asking questions. So I think every good leader needs to be willing to ask questions and not necessarily leading questions. So leading questions would be questions that you ask to drive somebody to a specific conclusion. But you don't want those kinds of questions. You want questions. So if somebody brings up a problem to you like, oh my gosh, these expenses are too much. Okay, that would be a bookkeeping, accounting type question. My response to that individual would be, so can you clarify what you mean by that? So then the person says, well, I mean, everything's just skyrocketing. Great. Can you be more specific? So I'm getting the person to give me information, and then I'm shutting my mouth and listening for the response. And by listening to the response and taking notes and feeding that information back to the individual, I'm making sure I understand what the concerns are with the team. I think that's extremely important. I think another thing that's important, and it's something we're going to get ready to do in our team, is to do some personality and really personality assessments. So there's a personality assessment known as DISC. DISC means dominant. It goes for four personality types, and no one is one specific personality type. If they are, they're probably an outlier of sorts. But let's say that, for example, I tend to be what's called a high I. I'm an intuitive. So that means that I'm very sensitive to how people are responding and feeling, which in some ways makes me a very excellent leader. And in other ways is a handicap. Talk about that later.
Yeah.
And then the other supporting personality trait that comes in for me is that I'm also steady. So I also don't have to be out in front all the time. I find great gratitude in systems and just, doing the back office type of work. Now there's also the dominant and compliant. So DISC is dominant. That would be the person who tends to take charge in a situation. They can sometimes be blunt, or you might find them, somebody like myself might find them a little challenging to work with. And then there's compliance. So those are the people who like the rules and following the rules and everything's by the book. And there's a place for everybody in the organization. And if you know where the personality strengths and weaknesses of your team, that can also help you to evaluate the unique needs of your team. And then there's a number of resources out there to adapt your leadership style to the needs of your team. Because if I understand, so I have one team member who she requires a lot of data, which I can find a bit, I can find that a bit challenging because I'm not a data person, unless it fits into getting the back office work done. So, but she requires a lot of data. If I'm modify, so part of my job with her is to give her information that she needs to a point. But the other is to also teach her how to get the additional information, because as the company leader, I don't always have time to do that research. That's why I pay other people to do it. So I think understanding your team's personality traits, making sure that at your meetings, you're really listening and reflecting back to make sure that you've got the right information. Then one, it helps the team to be heard. Two, it enables you to see how you may have to adapt your leadership style to the needs of the team without compromising who you are. And of course, those personality types are very valuable so that you can, because there are ways to communicate with specific personality types that work better than others, because the entrepreneurial mindset and leadership, that's all about scaling. It's all about getting bigger and better, and the constantly changing environment that we find ourselves in, despite government rules and regulations or world events. If you're an entrepreneur, then there's nothing to say that tomorrow is going to be the same as today. And yet you, as the leader of the company, have to provide the assurance to your team that all is well, you've got their back, and that at the end of the day, the week, the month, the year, 5 years, they have security in the company.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Like giving them a space to talk about their needs and their issues, and without the judgment. And before you came on, I was saying that maybe, especially in a company with hundreds or even thousands of people, that could be done anonymously
Mhm.
in a way like a filling in a form or tick box exercise in a way that,
Mhm.
because also I was saying before you joined me, it's far cheaper to keep the staff that you have than
Mhm.
to go out and try and find new staff to fill those shoes. Because if people aren't feeling that their needs are met, they will go somewhere where their needs are being met, whether
Yes.
that be emotionally, financially, even spiritually. It could be that if they're not feeling the company culture, if they're not
Mhm.
feeling embraced by that company culture, they will go somewhere else. And um, being listened to is definitely something that people want, that outlet to be able to say, I feel this, or whether that's anonymously or talking one to one to human
Mhm.
resources or somebody else in the team or a mentor or something. They need to have that outlet so that they can feel that they are making a change, or at least talking about something that they would like changed or implemented, or like you say, how can you help them grow, but also using their skills to their best ability,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know?
Yes, and, as you were saying that, one of the things too, I think as a leader, sometimes things come up and you may not know exactly how to respond. This happens in sales and this happens in leadership. I think it's okay to say, "Thank you for giving me that information. I really need to think about it, but can I get back with you?" And see, again, that's again about the person being heard, the person feeling like they are being heard. And this has to be genuine listening. This isn't just, yeah, okay, and it has to really be that you're engaging with the individual in order to really find out what their concerns are. We just recently had something happen, and it stirred up a couple of things for some people, which was um, interesting. Um, and a couple of days, so during the encounter, I got defensive. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't handle it as well as I could have. So I decided to reach out to the individual and just ask some more questions. The one individual who had the biggest questions, I reached out to them, and and then I just started to ask questions. You know, you mentioned this concern. What is it that is driving your concern? Are you concerned about, well, and actually that would have been a leading question. So I didn't do a great job, I will confess. But going back to the individual and asking questions and getting clarification about the work, getting clarification about the concerns, it does a couple of things. One, if you don't handle that as a leader in your company, what's going to happen is gossip will open up. Now, it's probably gossip as it is, but it's real important to contain gossip and go to the source to make sure that whatever they're concerned about, you're dealing with. Because if you're not addressing concerns with your team, then they will come up with their own conclusions. And keep in mind, they do not have the information you have. And so that's really important because they're going to come up with their own conclusions regardless. So that's why you have to stay in communication with your team. You have to be in communication with the people who are responding on your behalf, and and make decisions accordingly.
Yes, definitely. Don't just be sitting in your ivory tower and making the decisions based on
Yeah.
one person's opinion. Definitely. And if it means bringing in external people, um, there's a guy that I know here who has recently designed an app to help people with their workplace happiness. Because if people are happy, then they will be more likely to stay. Even, people desire happiness at work even above financial rewards. That shocked me
Really?
because most people that I've talked to is like, yeah, money first, and then we'll figure the rest of it out. But they figured out that a lot of different surveys and studies within larger companies, they much preferred having things that made them happy. So whether that was, and again, I mentioned some of these at the start, whether that was having a half day on a Friday or a little bit more flexibility in working hours over school holidays, or whether it was everybody getting together for a summer barbecue, or, having work related things, but in a more relaxed environment, also helped with the happiness factor within the staff. So it wasn't all about, going into work and someone saying hello to them,
Mhm.
or, in some cases it was providing a yoga room that they could go to before or after work or during lunch, or, somewhere that they
Mhm.
could go and meditate and de-stress, and or gym equipment. It's something they interviewed their staff. They
Mhm.
inquired. They put out the anonymous surveys of what would make you happy at work, and the majority of them came back, and it was not financial. So I find that very interesting.
That is, and that can also help people weather changes, which leads us to the next
Yes.
topic, which is flexibility in decision making. So that we're not talking about waffling back and forth. Um, there's a proverb that says that a person who is hasty in their words is a brother to a destroyer. And what that means is that if you try to, sometimes you have to make quick decisions, right? But you also want to make sure that you have as much data as you need to make a wise decision, if you will. It's sometimes things change, and you have to adapt new strategies when when there's new information and new challenges. So, here in the United States, we are hitting on President Trump's first 100 days, and there's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of people uncertain, and so based on that, this is actually a timely discussion here in the United States, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a politically based discussion. I'm not here to discuss the merits or demerits of what the United States is going through right now. What I am here to say is that with changing conditions and changing with challenges that arise, doing it the way we've always done it is not going to help you adapt to the current environment. Let's take a look at organizations like Montgomery Ward. Montgomery Ward is a prime. So do you guys have Montgomery Ward, or did you have it over in Ireland or in the EU?
No, we never had it here. No, not that I've remember or heard of.
So Montgomery Ward continued to do business as they always did. This is in spite of all of the digital advances. And I'm not intimately familiar with what happened to Montgomery Ward, but one thing that was obvious is they didn't change with the times. They weren't flexible enough to navigate through the new things that were coming, the digital innovations, and the various things that were going to help them stay in touch with the uh, constantly changing customer base. It used to be that you would get catalogs in the mail and you ordered from the catalog in the mail, and I remember those days. But now we're digital, and if
I
you're
remember those days as well.
right,
It's not
right,
that long ago that I think.
no, it's not, and so if you want to stay relevant, you also have to learn where you have to pivot. Pivot was the big word, right? when
Yeah, during
COVID hit.
COVID,
It
that
was
yeah, yeah.
the big word. And it's no different now. Now, I'm not saying that you have to shift with every changing wind,
No, but
but
the worst thing that a business can do, or the worst phrase that they can say is, "We've always done it this way."
yes. Oh,
That's the worst
Tom
thing.
Reed. Tom, it is so good to see you.
Likewise, can you hear me?
Welcome, Tom. Yes, we
We
can.
can hear you well. And welcome to our 4 viewers. Thank you for joining us today. So
This
we're
is
talking
different.
oh, go ahead.
This
Adaptive
is
leadership
different.
style, Tom. Take it
Mm,
away. We're talking about flexibility and decision making with challenges and new things.
You really don't want to hear my rants on those topics, do you?
Well, we
We
were
would
just
like
saying,
to.
the worst phrase a company can say is, "We've always done it this way,"
7
and
most
not
dangerous words in business.
Yep.
see.
That's strapping the bomb to your chest. You can be your own suicide bomber that way.
And the 3 worst customer service words you can ever say, it's
Are?
our policy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Nobody likes hearing that as a consumer.
I have a friend, he's a speaker as well, a bit of a comedian, and he's got his own website. You can buy this on his website. He has his own policy book. And he carries it when he travels. And so if he gets bumped from an airline or something, and he says, "Hey, can you do this or do that?" and they'll go, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's against company policy." And he pulls out his book and he says, "Well, I have my own set of policies. And you see right here on this page, it says, you have to do what I ask." And he says very often, people enjoy the humor and they go, "All right, let me see what I can do." And so he gets away with a lot of this kind of stuff. But yeah, I've always thought it'd be a good thing to have my own policy book.
Well, something that you should write next, maybe.
I'm going to steal
But
Tim's. But yes. So I'm sorry, what type of leadership were you talking about?
Adaptive leadership. So we just finished talking about assessing your team's needs, and that's primarily through communication, also understanding some of the personality traits that drive some of your team members so you can communicate with them better, and not to be afraid to say, I need to get back with you on that, because in a changing environment, sometimes you don't want to give the answer that flies through the top of your head. You really need to give it some thought, and then really get back with the team so that they realize that you're taking their concerns or whatever the concern is, that you're taking it seriously. Now we're talking about flexibility and decision making, about being open to changing strategies when you're faced with new information or challenges, and would love to hear your take on that.
Well, so much to say. This is something we often find applying in politics, and that is that a person who doesn't change their mind based on new information is a fool. And you hear these people say, "Oh, well, you're just flip-flopping." No, I got new information. It changed my perspective. And you've heard, Anna, you've heard me say this when a lawyer, and they're famous lawyers do this all the time, you ask them a question, they go, "Well, it depends." What good is that? It doesn't help me. And I've always trained people that whenever anybody, lawyers in particular, say that to you, you just stop them right there and you say, "Tell me exactly, on what does it depend?" And you begin to frame the issue much better when you say, "Well, this is a variable, that's a variable." And there may be a lot of variables. I mean, maybe a bunch of stuff, but you got to get it out on the table. Because then when one of those, let's call them assumptions that you made, changes, or you get better data on it, then it's totally appropriate to say, the initial decision is not the best one to make. We have to flow with this as we get new and better information, because we never have 100% of the information we wish we had for any decision. And I, in classes, sometimes I even boil it down to how did you decide what you were going to wear today? And you say, well, what decisions did I have to make? I can't tell you in my corporate legal world how many young ladies I had to send home because of what they chose to wear on any particular day. But, that was in an era when those things raise their head too often. But yes, every decision we make has variables to it. And you don't always have all the information, and you make the best ones you have. And in the grand scheme of things, who cares what you wear for the most part? On the other hand, there was something on the news this weekend. You're familiar with Bill Belichick, the NFL coach? And he's like 74, and he's got himself a 24-year-old girlfriend. You know that story?
Oh, yeah. It's been all over the news.
And he was in an interview. I think it was on 60 Minutes this weekend. And he was on an interview. And he was wearing a ripped sweatshirt. I mean, literally, it had holes in it and everything for a 60 Minutes interview. And one of the commentators made the comment, and he said, well, she really isn't in control there, because no woman would have let her man show up on TV dressed like that. And you think, well, what went into that kind of a decision to wear that for that kind of a show? The whole thing doesn't make sense to us. And so clearly, so many things don't make sense to us in life and business and leadership and all of these areas where we have to say, I clearly don't have enough information, or I don't have the same information you have. And so let's not fight, let's share information. And you can work through a lot of these issues if you do it that way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I like what you said there, Tom. It's not flip-flopping. It's receiving more information and working on that information and changing your thought process or changing your opinion based on the new information, and not just because you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or because, you had a bad hair day, or, a fly went into your soup, making all these, like, changing your mind should be a full thing, and not just, well, 5 minutes ago, I really wanted a piece of chocolate, and now I want, a full-on piece of cake, and then later I might want some cornflakes. That's not decision making. That's just capricious. Just taking what you want because you want it, rather than analyzing something important, like, where do I want my business to go? What do I want it to succeed in? What do I want it to be known for? And sticking to that until you need to, and the phrase that we've been using since COVID, pivot, or something comes along, or world events happen and you need to make a shift, but you don't shift erratically. You can't shift just because something happened. You shift with that thing, not in spite of it.
Well, and two, if you're looking to make a shift, of course, you want to make an informed decision, which sometimes means, well, oftentimes means that with the information you have, you're doing some kind of analysis. And if you're in good communication with your team, you want to make sure that they're giving you all the information that you need. And also, to be honest, I'm a big advocate of a mentor or somebody outside your organization who you can bounce ideas off of. I just had a situation today. I was talking to my mentor, and I was telling him about a certain circumstance that I'm facing. And he said, Anna, it sounds to me like you're making an assumption that X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, I'm just hedging my bets. He goes, Anna, let's look at it from this perspective. Suddenly, my strategy changed because his perspective gave me more latitude to accomplish my original goal. It wasn't an initial strategy I had, but it's a new piece of information. So sometimes it's not about changing direction. It's about acting on new information to expand your current strategy to be more effective. And if your team sees that you're leading in that direction with that strategy, with new ways of coming at the same problem, you know what, they're gonna rally behind you because they're gonna see that you're an innovator, that you are working to keep things moving. I'd really love to hear your take on that, Tom, being our leadership expert.
You honor me. Yes, I've studied it extensively, but it's like every day I learn how much I still don't know about all of these things, and part of it's because people are people. Human nature is so unpredictable. You look at look at things on the national level, and all of this talk about tariffs, and people all have an opinion, but when you say to them, well, what is a tariff? How does a tariff actually work? They don't know. They have no fucking idea. And they're often just repeating talking points somebody else said. And when you start listening to the economists who ought to understand such things, you quickly discover that there's no consensus among them either. And therefore, how do you form your opinion when even the experts you would typically rely on don't seem to have a consensus opinion? Now, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, because they can work in a lot of different ways. People ask this question all the time about our current president. And they'll say, well, tariffs are terrible. Tariffs are going to just run us in the ground. Tariffs are going to make things more expensive. Yes, if they're implemented, it could happen that way. It doesn't have to, but it could happen that way. But if you've read his book on the art of the deal, it's very easy to see he has no intention of imposing tariffs. It's a threat. It's a threat to bring others to the table to talk about it and fix problems within the tariff system that we have. Free trade tends to be the better approach, particularly for capitalistic societies. But can I get every economist to agree to that? No, it's just my view of how these things play out. And so my point being that if you say, well, the president is just a tax and spend kind of guy because he's trying to generate these tariffs, or you say, yeah, but he's a masterful negotiator, and this is all part of his ploys and his gambits and his whatever you want to call them in terms of negotiation strategies, and you can pick your lane. And then you step back and you say, yeah, but everybody sees the exact same things going on. It's their personal assessment of, is it good, is it bad, is it smart, is it going to work, is it not going to work, etc. And as we've watched, and this has happened through numerous administrations, some of them move very quickly. And so a decision made today may have absolutely no validity tomorrow. And it's okay to change your mind. That's what I was saying earlier about that. On the other hand, and as you were saying, being capricious about the whole thing, and it's, well, it's this, well, it's that, it's, how about this, or how about this other thing? People can't follow you. People are like, what are you thinking? Where are you coming from? How are you ever able to form an opinion? And I love these people who think out loud. You've probably run into those before. And I've been known to say to them on occasion, does your train of thought have a caboose? I hear you thinking all these different things, but you haven't focused me on what are the important things. What are the drivers? What are the real significant factors? And to make good decisions, that's where you need to focus.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think, and that is important because, ultimately, the person at the top of the organization, ultimately that person is responsible for the decisions that are made. And if, there has to be a certain level of transparency. I don't think the leader has to be totally transparent because too much information can create too much problem for the followers. So we need to be discreet in the information that we share with our team as we're working toward transparency, but keeping in mind that there are some things that you just kind of have to hold close to the chest. But I love how you talked about how focus is necessary, because I'm one of those that tends to ramble. I have a son he'll stop me and he'll go, Mom, what's the point? And that's okay. I love it because he brings me back to, am I driving a point or am I just talking? Well, our last topic, do you have anything to say, Esther, before we move on to our last topic?
No, I was just going to say you have guided us perfectly to our last point, for today. So if you want, I'll bring this one up, and then the two of you can discuss this. And when we're talking about balancing leadership with management, so harmonizing visionary leadership with the practical demands of everyday task management. How do we find the perfect balance? Does it exist?
I will let Tom talk about that one because I think it's a recipe. Yeah, I think it's. Oh, you can keep it both of us up there because I would love to see everybody see Tom's response. But I think it's a recipe. So, for example, if I'm making chocolate chip cookies, I won't necessarily put turmeric in the cookies, will I? Unless now, if I'm making a different recipe,
Don't know.
or the same the same ratio of ingredients that goes into cookies isn't the same ratio of ingredients that will go into baking a cake. They're all they're all different. And so when you're talking about leadership, when you're talking about management, I think the balancing act comes in determining what is the strength that's needed in this particular situation. Is it the visionary person that needs to step up and say, okay, we're heading in this direction, this is where we're going, and then come down to, okay, this is what we're going to do to get there? Or is it the person that says, okay, let's stay on task, guys, we're not getting anywhere, we're spinning our wheels? Tom, I really want to hear your take on all of this.
I believe it was Peter Drucker who said that management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that, whether it was him who said it or not. I may be remembering incorrectly. And when we do leadership development, one of the first steps to someone who strives to be a leader, we ask them the question of what do they believe? And we have a little belief exercise that we go through. And it's very simple. And I may have mentioned it in these sessions previously. Make a statement of your belief. I believe the sky is a beautiful shade of blue. Okay. You're welcome to that belief. You're welcome to any belief you wish to have. There used to be a t-shirt, I remember, said, everybody should believe in something. I believe I'll have another beer. Whatever your belief is. But then the next magic question has to come up. Why do you believe it? And we force people into this mode because once they understand what they believe and why they believe it, it's amazing how easy decisions become because they've now thought it through and it's registered in their mind and it's much more automatic in saying, well, my beliefs are these, my principles behind those beliefs are these. I understand that. I've studied that. Therefore, this decision is simple. It's obvious. Here's my answer. And you can do that. And so once you understand your belief structure, then it's much easier to create what we refer to as a vision. And I know some more modern kid wrote about your why, and he wrote an entire book about it, and on about 10 pages from the end, he said, what I'm really talking about here is vision. And I'm like, that's what I've been thinking the whole time I've been reading your book. It's not new. It's old, and you got to have a vision or your why, or whatever you want to call it. And the best leaders have a strong vision. They have something they seek to achieve. Now, whether you accept that as and again, I hate to do the political thing, but make America great. That's a vision. That's a clear vision. Now there's a lot of pieces to it. How do you go about it? A lot of debate. I get that. But let's even take the current Doge expert. What prompted him to say we need to go to Mars and then actually make it possible? What prompted him to say we need tunnels? And he got a boring company, and now he's out there building tunnels. We need better internet. Oh, now there's Starlink. He's had this series of visions that have created things that ideally have made society better, have been good improvements. Now, nobody's perfect. Nobody makes right decisions all the time. But I'm merely giving those as examples of saying grand and bold visions really coalesce people around a leader. And what is a leader? It's someone who has followers. And so whether you are managing people, and they all need different management techniques, or you're leading people, It depends on whether there are things you're trying to get them to do at the task level, or whether you're getting them to see that big picture of what could be if we all work together and have the same vision and do those kind of things. So a lot of words, I realize, but trying to meld a bunch of different concepts into the thought that without a vision, you're not much of a leader. You're not going to attract followers. And without understanding your own belief structure, you're not going to understand your own vision. You're not going to be able to articulate it very well. And so whether you are managing people or managing a task, and we all need to do that at some level, we got to get things done. But we also need to lead. We also need the visionary pieces of that based on belief structures and what can be achieved. And so I don't know how far off the topic I've wandered by saying all that, but that's what I have to say.
Oh, well, here, if I may rephrase, interpret perhaps what's being said here is that it's not necessarily a balancing act. It's one is the bedrock that leads to the other. So if we're looking at leadership is the visionary. It's the direction we're going. And it's the ability of an individual to inculcate that into their followers so that you're all moving in the same direction. And then, of course, management is how are we getting there? So it's not necessarily a balancing act. There are times that maybe you have to be more focused on the vision to help people, especially if things are tough, to coalesce around it, or if there's a lot of change, the vision still needs to be there. And then it follows through with management. It follows through with the productivity piece. So in my own company, we had a situation where some of our accounts, we were getting phone calls that we were people were not getting their electricity got turned off. And that's a big deal for our group. First time it was like, okay, it could be an anomaly. Second time, that's a bigger oops. Third time, it's like, okay, this is a problem. This is not just something that happened. And so the vision, of course, is that we're providing the best in hospitality to the people who are staying with us. And then we had to go back into the systems, the management piece. So I worked with the person who was responsible, and she in turn worked with her team member who actually handles all of those pieces. And I appreciated her approach. She said, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm going to meet with her. And they came up with a system to address the problem so that it's not as likely to happen in the future. And I just thought, okay, I laid out the concept of what was needed to make sure we're providing the best in hospitality. And the leader of that particular function, she understood that vision well. And then she went into the business of managing the workload and creating a system that works to prevent the problem from happening again. So I think it's where does leadership end and management begin? Is it really important? In my estimation, they have to work hand in hand. Sometimes management needs to be more proactive and maybe sometimes leadership, but there's still both components to managing, growing, changing, scaling.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think with having an adaptive leadership style, instead of it being a fixed mentality or mindset, it has to be a growth mindset. Because, like we said earlier, there are people who will always do the same thing every time because it's always worked. But life has moved on, business has moved on, the online world has moved on. Even in the last year, we've seen the rise of AI. We've seen the rise of a lot of different things going on in each country. And, majority here today are in the United States, but there's stuff happening in every country around the world to one extent or another that affect businesses, whether it be tariffs, whether it be taxes, whether it be increase in minimum wage or salaries, or working contracts being modified, and every new government brings a new set of challenges. Even the old governments bring new sets of challenges, but having that growth mindset will stand you in a better stead than having a fixed mindset of it's always been done this way. My great great grandfather did it this way. I mean, my father is a farmer, and if he was still doing things the way his father did things, they wouldn't have any machinery. They wouldn't have any more than 5 cows and 5 sheep, just enough to keep the family fed itself. Whereas now, he's got a milking machine that will almost do the milking for him, and he has machinery that will gather in the harvest. And times have changed and moved on, and people and businesses in any area and any industry need to do that too. So definitely think with a growth mindset would be my piece of advice for that one.
If
And
I
that
may,
was,
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, no. Go ahead, Tom, because I was going to bring us kind of full circle here. And so please.
I was just thinking as Esther was talking there about this whole idea of leadership styles. I get in these discussions with people all the time, and they've been trained inappropriately, in my view. They've been trained to identify their style, and to me, that is just hogwash. That's like useless, because unless you are adaptive, unless you can deal with let's use Myers-Briggs just as a metric for all of this. Unless you can deal with the extrovert who won't shut up, as well as the introvert who won't speak up, you're not leading the team. You're not leading them well. So you need a style for each of the individuals. And you have to be able to call on those styles whenever they're needed. I know some of the most famous conversations I've had, people's like, well, I'm a servant leader. And I'm like, that's great, but what else do you need to know? Well, I'm a servant leader. That's what it's all about, just being a servant leader. And I'm like, you're going to burn yourself out and be useless to everybody if that's all you are. And so, yes, servant leadership is a wonderful style in its place, where it belongs, when it is useful. You've got to be able to call on a vast range of things. And Annie, you know this, Esther, I think you do too. The WBS I put together on leadership has 229 elements. Servant leadership is one of them. There's a whole lot more to the whole picture. And you've got to be able to draw on the best of yourself based on the best of your training and development to get the best out of your team. And as we draw close to the end, let me just stop there.
Excellent. So today we've discussed the importance of adaptive leadership as you're growing. I mean, I don't know of a single entrepreneur who's in business just to barely make it. We're all learning to grow. We're all learning I personally find a lot of satisfaction in growing a company. To me, it's like raising a child, and hopefully my child will grow up to be self-sufficient. So we've talked about we've talked about that. Next week, I think this dovetailed in very well. We're going to be talking about a growth mindset. What does that look like? There's a book by Carol Dweck called The Growth Mindset, and she distinguishes between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you need to develop a growth mindset. So that's what we'll be talking about next week. And in the meantime, we want to thank Tom for joining us as our leadership expert. So we'll continue this discussion next week. Tom, hope you can join us. It's always a pleasure to have you joining us on the USA Biz Party. Anything else you want to share, Esther, before we close out?
No, I think I'm really looking forward to growth mindset next week. And it's something that I think some people watching and listening will be struggling with. And it's definitely something that always needs a refresher, because you might think that you're heading in the growth mindsets direction, but something might be just be having you there stuck in the past and in the we've always done it this way phase.
Right. So if you're watching, thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing to our channel. Be sure to click the little bell so that you get notified when we go live again next week. It's an amazing week. So, and as we're heading into May, all your days be amazing and filled with success. So take care and God bless.
Bye.
Thank you all.